Hey, how you doing? Chris Courtney here, new Pragmatic. It's kind of a light morning, so I've been doing some investigating around. A student of mine, Rebecca, has some specific questions related to. Basically, She's trying to do a handoff to developers, and it's when you're doing freelance work, man, it always has the potential to go sideways on you. So the ability to the ability to communicate with the other side and unlock tools that will help you communicate is really important. And this morning I wanted to do some digging because there's a there's a plugin that was released about a month ago for Figma, and it was one of those things. This is the classic story of any sort of plugin. The really useful ones are generally by somebody who has like 100 followers on Twitter. No one's ever heard of them, and they do something really outstanding, and then you have to go digging to find it because you think about it a month later. And that's exactly what this is. And what we're gonna do is we're just Rebecca's got a question that leads into this issue, which is, all right, I get it that Figma can create you can create screens at phone and tablet and desktop sizes, and that's great. But how do you show how those things change depending on the different orientations? And there's a plugin called Responsive that, and oddly enough, Responsive was available. Nobody had selected Responsive. We were Responsify, like there were all these really clever ways of saying responsive, and this guy just comes along and picks Responsive. Like after plugins have been out for 10 months, Responsive's still available. Don't outsmart yourself on naming kids, and that counts for naming kids as well. Sometimes we can outsmart ourselves. Elon Musk, I'm looking at you. But I wanted to take some time addressing Rebecca's questions, because she's got some questions about, okay, so what's the grid structure I use, because she started designing on the desktop version, and because again the client was like, I need the desktop redesign. Okay. And there's some real questions about like the missed opportunities, and I've read through her notes, and like Rebecca's growing as a designer. So much of this is not her design skills. It's a negotiation that happens with a client before you get into the design. And that, oh man, I could write an entire course just on pitfalls to avoid while doing freelance work. How to keep your sanity and your client happy. Like that's a course in and of itself. And maybe we'll get to that. Maybe we will get to that. But today, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on this responsive plugin, in an effort to assist Rebecca. Because again, the reason I'm doing this today is Rebecca's got a question about how do I show the developers what this is supposed to do, without coding it. Like she doesn't necessarily want to just dig into the code, and I get it. Everybody's different that way. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Yeah, I never really announced that this is the feedback loop, but who cares? Who cares? Hey, greetings one and all. Chris Courtney here, new Pragmatic. It's time for the feedback loop. I'm going to jump in today to a new plugin called Responsive. Oddly enough, name was available, and the whole premise of this is one of my students, Rebecca, has a project that she's needing to hand off to developers, but she wants to be able to show them how the responsive breakpoints should react. And well, it's not an application, it's a plugin for Figma that allows you to do just that. And I have not kicked the tires on this thing, so we're just going to rip off the Band-Aid and do this. And we're gonna do some playing around. This, we may be here a while. All right. This is very much just the live stream right now. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can take a look at what this is supposed to do. So this is the plugin right here. It's responsive. You can see it's been installed 4,000 times. Emin Shani is the developer here, and it was like updates just happened. This is version 4 that we're going to be testing, and on August 15th, 2020. Okay, so on August 15th, 2020, he made some updates. That was like 4 days ago. All right. And he also has included a demo link over here to Twitter, and let's see. Yeah, here it is right here. Let's just take a look at what this is supposed to do. So you can see, pretty cool, right? This will re-loop, and you'll be able to see, this actually starts as 4 screens. So there's phone, tablet, laptop, desktop, and then it looks like you go here to the responsive frame, and it loads all of those in to this particular frame. That's pretty outstanding. It's very helpful so that people, when they look at your work and they're trying to help you build, they get an idea of what exactly it is that you're wanting them to do. Now, there's a few things that are probably at play here that we haven't really talked about a lot here, or we haven't looked at them. Responsive constraints are a big, I'm absolutely certain, are a big part of this. And responsive constraints are the way components can be flexible from one size to the next. All right, so when we go in and begin looking at this, I'm going to come back to responsive constraints because I am, in fact, testing this pretty much live. And what we're going to do is I'm going to exit out of this because that's great to see. What we're going to do is we're going to come back to this editable Supermelon project that Rebecca's got. And I'm just going to copy, like, I'm just going to copy, oh, hey, it's taking a second to load. I'm just going to copy this main component right here. All right. And the big reason I'm doing that, I'm going to come over here and just paste it in. Okay. So the main reason I'm doing this is because we need like a sandbox here. I don't want to necessarily like try to redo all of this all at once because, again, I have not figured out exactly how to use this plugin before, so we're live testing it. One of the keys to live testing is to come in and make sure you understand what's happening with the tool. And too often, and this is with code as well, we try to take everything that we've done and immediately apply something. It's like, oh, it's going to magically work. And then when it doesn't, or sometimes it works and you're like, oh, wow, it worked, great. And then you move along and it breaks later and you're like, I'm not sure why that happened. I want to make sure that we understand exactly what we're dealing with here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some frames down. Let's go ahead and let's put an iPhone down here. Then we will get a tablet as well. We're going to basically take that shape here and we're going to try to make it work for everything. We'll redesign it for everything. So now, oops, that's not what we wanted. Frame, come here to tablet. Let's get the I guess that'll work. I gotta be honest, I haven't pulled the old iPad out in a while, so it's at least for Figma. Then we'll go to desktop, and here's the desktop, right? That looks familiar. Okay, so if this functions the way that I believe it should function, this is probably being predicated off of Smart Animate. And that's additionally another thing I want to do is I want to simplify this. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that away. I'm going to make a new page. We're going to call this responsive. and now we're pasting this in. So now we just have these pieces. And again, so much of this is just making sure that you can see what's happening. So the first thing I want to do is I want to come through and basically create a section out of this content. I'm going to group it. I'm going to call this group content, and that now, you know, I can move it around, whatever. The next piece here is we have this background, and this background is just an image. It looks like, I'm trying to see how she's done this. Okay, so it's an image with a rectangle on top. You don't really need that rectangle on top of the image. Like if we hit it, it's interesting. Where is the other image? Okay, so that's the main image. And then if we turn this one back on, okay. So this is something interesting, Rebecca. I want to copy that rectangle over. I'm going to put it over here. All right. Now I'm going to delete that group. Oh, weird. Well, I really didn't want to delete that. We'll delete the group, paste this back in. And now what I want to do is I want to add a fill on top of that. And instead of making it linear, I'm going to make it solid. And let's go pick up this color and let's multiply that down. And I think that's basically what you had, except now it's that tone on top of the image. I do want to go back and I just want to make sure we're working with the right thing. So I want to come back over. Now let's go over to responsive, paste it in. It has a slightly different construction. I'm sure one of the blend mode, like actually I can probably just look at this hero and pay attention. If I pay attention to the, oh, that's pass through. Interesting. Oh, I think I get it. Oh, it's set to 60. Okay, well I can do that. All I got to do is this 60. And then you had it set to darken? No. There's something different about this one. 60% normal. Okay. I'm not exactly sure why that is operating the way that it is, although I'll make an editorial decision here and just say that I like it a lot more like that. Anyway, you can do what you want to with the images. This is not, you can export whatever you want to. I'm just trying to clean this up for our usage. So we have content, and now we have main hero image. All right. Those two things are going, if they're named the same throughout these three screens, they should be responsive. So what I want to do really fast is I want to test this, and I'm going to drag this into desktop 1, right? And we're going to make that larger so it's matching the screen. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to come in and copy that over for, well, we don't want to copy it over for that. I want to copy this and bring it over to tablet. And now tablet is going to get proportionally larger, and we're going to put that content there. And then finally for the phone basically is the same thing we had for tablet, except, we can discuss the merits of this particular design construction. But now we've got 3 screens with 3 different crops. I just want to buy myself a little bit more space to operate with. 3 screens, 3 different crops, and now I've got the content. And the content if we duplicate that, obviously, I'm just going to, for our sake, I'm just going to center it up in the desktop one. I will then duplicate it for iPad, and iPad obviously has, this is the first place we're going to have to really rework the content. Now, that's interesting. There's like a duplicated learn more. Is that on all of them? Okay, let's circle back, because there's probably if there's a mistake, I want to fix it early. Okay, so that's fixed. Now, there are some things that we will probably end up wanting to come back to, and hey, look at that. I think this. No, that's not using auto layout. So auto layout, I think, is going to be a pretty big key here. But we're going to kind of drill down on this. All right. So I'm going to copy that over. I'm going to put it in play. All right, now this obviously is not a great solution, and when you drag it down, you know, it immediately begins to have problems. So a couple of the problems that we have are just the spacing to the top. We've got to fix that, right? Then we've got this typography, and then obviously we've got these elements down here that are clearly struggling. So I'm going to make this wider. I don't know that it got taller per se. This is really where I would love to have auto layout being used, but it's not. We can circle back on that though, because auto layout, it would be taking the shape. It would be paying more attention to the boundaries that are around the text, and then altering, so you don't have to go back in and drag things around. But it's fine. This is a test. So we've adjusted those things, and again, this is just called content, and everything's named the same. So when we apply this tool, if it's doing what I think it's doing with Smart Animate, it's going to go ahead and do those and perform those breakpoints. And again, I'm not passing judgment on the design itself at this point. All right. So we're going to do the same thing here, and this is where, you know, we have our first real quandary of what to do with the content, because you know, where you can go with the same sizes between desktop and tablet and it work okay, here it won't, right? So we have to really modify this to be appropriate for a mobile device. And you know, if I was really wanting to get in here, I would say, okay, well, let's make it this wide, and you know, it's 375, and I want 10 to each side, so I'll make it 355, and I'll move it over 10, and that could be the way that works out. But I actually want it to be 335, so I'll move it over 20. So that gives me the 10 to each side. I know that math doesn't seem to make sense, but you got to remember, on an iPhone, it's going to 2x. So the 10 is actually 20. Math is hard, and especially for me. But what you'll notice is right away, manufacturers is still long, so we would have to adjust that anyway. And smart rule in responsive design is always to utilize a media query to change that text size. So I'm just going to put it at 40. And 40 is still sizable. There's nothing wrong with using 40. You probably also want to come back and adjust this subhead, because right now it's just too big. So 40. If this goes down to 24, that is working better. And then we've got these here, this button and learn more. And the question here becomes, okay, so does this does this stretch out, and are these still side by side? Um, I'm going to go with sure. It's not, I don't think they have to be as tall, which inserts a new, again, this is where if we just had auto layout being used, it would take care of itself. Not judging though. Okay. So we've made those adjustments. All right. And whether they're perfect or not is not the concern here. Right now we're testing. This is also, we can come back in and test this responsive plugin. All right. So you have iPhone X, iPad Pro, desktop. Now, if I am, and this is our original, so we're just going to drag that up to the top. If I remember the demo correctly, there was an additional frame, and it was, I believe it was a phone frame. It was just kind of down here, and this is where there's not a lot of documentation on this solution. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back over, and it's called preview. So they named this preview. I'm going to guess that what it's doing is it's going to say you're going to grab. Basically, the code is saying, grab these inputs, throw it into preview, and then they can drag it. All right. So I grab these. These are the input frames. The responsive frame. It looks like maybe you have to select okay, so they've named it preview. It probably doesn't have to be preview, sorry. Here we go. Probably doesn't have to be preview, but I'm going to call it preview. Preview. And now let's go get that. Plugin. So plugin, responsive. Again, this is our first time using it, so I'm guessing I know how it works. All right, add all layout frames to be part of your responsive design. These are those. I'm going to add those. So this is iPad, and you can see it's got some breakpoints that are applied, and now it says add an empty frame to use as a responsive preview screen. So I'm going to hit preview, and now we've done that, and let's see what happens to our design. Okay, so there's a couple of things here that are, do you notice like nothing's happening here? I believe it's because we have not applied constraints. So let's first start with this background image. If I change the constraints to be the center, so center, or I want to start with center first, just to see if that works. Okay, so I'm going to delete preview, and we're going to try this again. And again, this is how if you're ever wondering, like, hey, how do you figure out a plugin? This is how. This is exactly how. So I'm going to say, and again, I'll call this preview. I'll call it preview 2 because I just want to kind of keep track of how many times we're working through this. So let's call this preview 2. This is a responsive frame. We're going to put that into play. And it's interesting that it didn't, it took a second to kind of do that. So I'm going to just copy these over. Let's do those. Those are the previews. And now preview 2 will be the responsive frame. And let's see what happens. Specifically, we changed the background image, right? And the background image should change now as we drag. Okay, interesting. So now it's moving, but it's not, it's not really snapping into place until until later. And then what happens here? I'm curious. Okay. So it's not elastic yet. But I mean, we're kind of you know, this is a different issue than what we had before. So let's come back in. This is our main hero. It's centered. So instead of centered, what if we changed it to scale? And I'm curious, like, if we change it to scale, do we have to re-import it? And the answer is, look at that. So now it's scaling, right? And what happens when we go taller? It's scaling now. So it appears that we don't have to necessarily re-import it. It appears like once it's connected, it's going to like take the changes. So let's see what happens now when we apply some changes here and we say, okay, well, I want this content to center. And instead of center on the middle content, I want you to scale. Well, I didn't want to do that. I want the whole thing. It's oh, all right. Okay. So now we're getting to a point where this is now starting to become responsive. However, there's a problem here. And the problem is that because auto layout hasn't been used, it's giving us these gaps. So instead of this moving up and collapsing and kind of soaking up that space, it's responsive to the width, which is what we asked it to do, but it basically goes back to its original design. But it's definitely like this is way cooler than and you know, this could have happened before with this design. Okay, that's the one thing that a lot of people don't realize is like this by itself can do everything that we were doing before. All right, the trick is that you don't see the breakpoints. Like there's no like change between these designs, and that's the real innovation with this plugin, I think, is the fact that it says, oh, and now I'm going to hand off. So this is really great because it gives us an opportunity to come in and say, all right, so what do we need to do here to make this truly responsive? And the first thing that I want to do is I want to come in and just add auto layout and see if this will operate as desired. So I'm going to pull this out, and obviously it's not stretching now, which is a problem. So here we need to change the constraints to center. Let's see what happens now when we drag this out. Okay, so it's not this needs to be, so it's center, so it's left is fine. Okay, could be these individual, and no, it's not the individual elements. Individual elements are fine. Scale center, center. Fixed width? Does that get us there? No, it does not get us there. Auto width is definitely the way to go there. Vertical, horizontal. Horizontal stacks it like that. Vertical stacks it like that. That holds it in place. This is growing down here, though. What I want to try to do is, when this isn't operating quite like I would think, I think it should. So I just want to kind of reconstruct this over here. So this is reconstructed. I'm not forcing it to be any particular size. I'm just copying the content, pasting it in, and then basically trying to reconstruct. Now, this should be, when we add in auto layout, when we move this, it's not doing what I want it to do. What does this work with the top 1% of manufacturers? Okay, like that should grow when we do that. Does this grow? Okay, it does grow. All right, so it's interesting. It's doing what I want it to do. It's just not doing it how I want it to do it. So let's take auto layout off of this for a second. Maybe I've implemented it incorrectly. Interesting because it's just locking in. I've had this trouble before. It's like the individual elements will move, but that won't. Let's take a look at this down here in responsive. This is the preview. Okay, so it's got the two different versions in here now, which is good. And that's also good to know that, like, when it hits the breakpoint, it references back to the plugin. But it's not reacting the way that I would like it to. Although it does move down the way that I would expect auto layout to move down, which is nice. So I put this over here to the side until we can. There's got to be a setting that I am screwing up here. That definitely isn't what I want. Well, maybe that is the issue. So if I say scale, and I say scale, that will tell these to essentially move with, but it's going to begin ignoring auto layout, I believe. Unless the whole thing is auto layout. And maybe that's the key. So I'm going to group this together. No, I'm not going to group it together. I'm going to add auto layout, and then I'm going to grab basically all of it. Let's do this. Let's do the well, that's an interesting update. I don't know where the content went. Okay, so that won't work. I just want to go back to the preview. It's definitely responding. But let's think about this here. Okay. There's more to it than just this background, right? Let's take auto layout off. Let's get these buttons back. Actually, why don't we just work with this one? Let's get started. Let's learn more. I'm going to put auto layout on those. And we're going to put auto layout on these. And then we're going to put auto layout on all of those. And let's see how they respond together. And they don't move. It's an interesting quandary, because I know there's something that's happening with auto layout, and it's got to be constraint related, and I just have not spotted it yet. That doesn't mean I'm not going to, but I haven't spotted it yet. Now if we center this, it just moves in the center, so it's not really responsive in the way that I want it to be. And okay, so there's some color on it, so we can kind of see what's going on. Just going to create a new shape. I'm going to say you are to scale. New plugins. They're fun. This is fun. Auto layout. there's a step I'm missing. What is it? Because we can totally get the breakpoints to line up. That's working. What's not working is the flow of the actual text, and that's the frustrating part right now. So we've got the image doing its part. Well, that's interesting. We've got the image doing its part. What we don't have is the content doing what it needs to do. And if I was typically creating this, so I just want to kind of come through and like, I want to draw this in as like, okay, I'm going to create a shape and it's not going to have any content in it. So if I said, okay, so this is headline 1, not that I want all caps, but headline, and that was where headline was going to be, and I'm going to go ahead and make it dark gray. All right, or that color. I'll push it there. I've not scaled it at all. I've just said, okay, you are the style for a headline. And now I'm going to say this is a deck here, and this is going to be, 24, and it's going to be that size. All right, so these two things are together, right? And I'm going to add auto layout to them, and now I'm going to, as we type into here, it's interesting. I think it's interesting because we haven't set a width for it, but in setting the width, it seems like that's where it gets angry. It's upon setting the width. It's, like, so long as I don't set the width. Well, actually, I think I just did set the width, didn't I? Okay, there. Like, nothing has a width set on it right now. So when we draw this in, that takes the width. I didn't set it, the text did. All right, so now if I were to come in and say, all right, the intention here is for you to oh, auto layout went away. There it is. Center. Okay, so I'm just going to keep the constraints to the left and to the top for now. We're going to come in, we're going to drag this text here. Now that pushed the headline off to the side. It did not pay any attention to any of the breaks that were already predetermined. I'm guessing that these breaks aren't really there. And that's right. That's why it did that. So really frustrating. Because I know in doing that, I probably just messed up the whole width piece of this. But we'll see. Yeah, like it doesn't move anymore. And that's the part that I'm struggling with. It's like, why won't it move? And maybe that's the key. Maybe the key is maybe the key is, as I stated earlier, we've gone one step beyond where we should be going. Let's close responsive. Let's just look at some text. Okay, let's just make and again, this is how you figure this stuff out, especially when there's not really any documentation. At least for responsive, the plugin that we're trying to use. I'm just going to say test auto layout. And again, this is a good point actually to begin looking at that grid question that Rebecca had. Let's lay down a grid. We're going to say the size of this is 2. And actually, let's columns 2. And it's going to have a margin on each side of 10. That gets us to a point where we can begin to just drag this stuff in. We're going to test auto layout, and then we're going to basically, oh wow, wait, I think it just dawned on me. I don't think he's using auto layout. It's like these images below. Those might be auto layout, maybe. But that was weird. But the text is a single line. Like, have I been duped by a single line of? Well, wait. I am so responsive. I think that. I think that blows up. Well, now it's not allowing me to really blow it up. Let's just look at this. We can even look at it at this size. I am so responsive stays at a single line. So like this text here never wraps. The text underneath wraps. So this text will likely wrap as needed for the design. Okay, and we'll make that regular just so we can watch it. That will be 20. We'll drag that in. I'm just curious. Did I get caught up in something that doesn't really work? So here the text is going to wrap. All right, but what we don't know is we don't know how this sets up with the other shapes. So we're just going to pull in some rectangles. All right, and again, simplify your sandbox whenever possible. I'm going to make these rectangles different colors so we can see how they react, and different sizes. Okay, so this rectangle will be red, this rectangle will be green, this rectangle will be purple. Okay, so and again we got, it's like the screaming guy motif, which is screaming guy, that'd be me. We'll make this 30. On a white background. Let's just test this out and see what happens. So now we'll go to this size, and this will instead be actually we won't duplicate it, we'll just put a new frame down. The new frame will be a tablet. It will be an iPad Pro 11, and here oh, and we're gonna mimic the design that they had in the other one. So let's do this, and let's make a new shape. And this rectangle will be let's make it yellow. Like a pukey yellow. Alright. So there's that layout. Alright, now let's go ahead and get a new grid on here, layout grid, we'll put columns, we'll put it at 6, and we'll say the margin is 20. And now we'll copy these things over. First I want this to scale, and let's move this over to do the same. And this is just the rectangle will do this, and maybe the trick is I just need to name it yellow. We'll name this one yellow. And now let's go ahead and make a new frame like we did before. That's not going to be very helpful. Frame. Let's go down here. Preview. I have no idea what time it is. Wow, I've been going at this for a while. But once I've like sink my teeth in on something, I can't like let it go. That would be sad. Preview. And I do like the fact that it works. It's just it's not working quite like I would like it to. Let's go ahead and pull in run less plugin. That'll pull up responsive. Here we're going to say, okay, we're going to grab these, and let's I'm curious about this, but let's just grab these and connect them. So these are going to be the input frames. Preview is going to be the output frame. And now let's see what happens to yellow. Yellow is definitely doing what I would hope that it would do. Notice that green is staying with the column. So that column structure is definitely helping out. They go away because they're not in the second screen. So let's focus on the type first. Okay. So this type, it should scale, right? And actually it should scale that way, not top bottom. We're just going to go keep it top, and we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to scale. We're going to bring these over to the next breakpoint. And what I'm interested in doing now is I'm interested in changing the layout a bit. You'd think that I would just be satisfied with just making the design work, but no, I've got to complicate things. So let's do that. All right, and let's see what we get. Okay, so now that layout is moving, but notice that the content below it is not following along. Like, yes, this is the original design, but when this comes up, these blocks you would believe would move up. So I think that's really where let's scale these as well. Okay, so you're going to scale to the left and right, and you're going to stay to the top. Let's see how that works, because that means these squares should get wider. Okay, so the squares are now getting wider. They're not quite staying with the column, which is bugging me a bit. Notice they kind of bleed out from, but everything seems to bleed out a bit from that column. It's not quite staying snapped to it, and I think that is a factor of scale being used, instead of, like, if you align this to the left, I think it just like stays on that column. So if we now just say, okay, you're aligned to the left, I don't think it's gonna I don't think it's gonna scale across. We'll preview it now. It's still doing the scale until we bring it back, and now it's just like stuck there. It's like it's not gonna move at all, and that's fine. I mean, it's okay. But it definitely seems like as we go across, like that's really where the design morphs a bit. And what's interesting to me is how this gets tighter here, where it's not really tight like that in the design. Maybe it's this top bottom thing. Let's try that. So now it's holding. It's interesting because the yellow hasn't, the yellow didn't grow like it did before. It stayed. So what does that mean? Let's come back. Let's see if we can get yellow to grow. Now, that's really interesting. Does this scale as it gets taller? It does. Okay. Okay. Very interesting. So does that mean that this shouldn't scale? It should just be to the top. And that means it's going to hold its place. And now it breaks there. But should this, yeah, this should be just to the top as well. It's all very interesting. But now this design is not doing what I think it should do. It's centered. Let's scale it. Let's keep it at the top. Let's scale this left to right as well. But that's the real quandary, is like, what happens to these blocks? They should move up. They shouldn't. They shouldn't just stay down there. And this is where I believe like auto layout may play a role. That's interesting, because these two need to be in auto layout together before this can be an auto layout. So this should be auto layout, that should be auto layout. Let's go ahead and I just pulled it out of auto layout. Add auto layout. Now let's refine this part of it to where those aren't centered. And now let's add these in auto layout together and see what we get. All right, so we've got auto layout set up. And it doesn't move at all now. That is so weird. Yeah, something about the way that I've constructed that is busted. Let's undo all those crazy auto layout additions. It's a lot more responsive, just the way it was. The only difference is, while the images and whatnot are scaling, and the text is scaling, it's not it's not responsive vertically. So that's really interesting. I do wonder. Yeah, at first I was. Yeah, it's set to the top, so that tells me that, like, hey, I want you to be as close as you can. I wonder if I group these together. Like if I don't just if I stay away from auto layout and I just group. And it looks like we got some. Nope. Just some people here. Let's just come on down. Let's take a look at this. So preview. And I've just grouped it together. Yeah, I want to do some more investigation here, because what's interesting to me is that we can get back and forth in these designs. You know, as we saw up here, the designs are in fact responsive. Like, you know, this, well, was. I must have deleted something there. The designs were responsive the first time around. This is responsive. It's like changing design, and that's great. It's not as fluid as I want it to be on first pass, but that I'm certain that I'm just doing something wrong with it. So I'm gonna give this another stab, because I do think that there's something very powerful about being able to come through and say, all right, yeah, so these are the designs, and even if they are not perfect, even if this is not where I want it to be long term, just being able to see like how it should move around between one preview to the next, I think is really key. So, like, again, let's come back to this preview, the first one, like not the second one. We'll kind of just push that down the page, and I'll delete that as well. But now let's come back. Let's build a frame. Let's go to iPhone X. That's the preview. And now the previews, let's just ditch this one. Now, one of the things that we discovered early on was that background image, it really helps if we go through and say, okay, this, hey, main hero image, you need to scale. Right? And we can do that. I mean, that's like super easy. Scale, and that takes care of a lot of the weirdness. Like you never get into this situation where the design breaks fully. Now the question happens, okay, well, hey Chris, this design is supposed to be deeper, and maybe this this background image isn't supposed to go the whole way. Like, what happens when this design gets deeper and the background image is only supposed to be X big? And it seems like that is something that we'll be able to preview really quickly right here. So this is desktop, and when we get here, like, that's where it's scaling. Yeah, that's interesting. So maybe that's where you can't say scale. You got to say just top. So now when we come in, okay, so we've got this and it's scaling, and yeah, okay. So now, yeah, you just got to know like where the breakpoints are, and like, yeah, that's super huge and not going to work very well. So we would have to, if this tablet was supposed to scroll, you'd have to come back in and say, all right, hey, instead of scale, I just want you to be at top, so that I can then come through and make this deeper. So let's kind of take a look at what happens now that we've done that. So there's like the desktop hero, and then we come down and there's like the depth of the tablet. Mobile's still going to be like super deep because we haven't said top on that. But that definitely gives you something more to work with regarding your handoff. Like, here's the way this component is supposed to work from one breakpoint to the next. And that's something that's hard to see when you just hand them a component. Like, if you just handed them a component and said, okay, so this is the hero component, and it's got all the it's set up for responsive. That's great, but they can't see it. So I would show them the three side by side, and then as we broke down a little earlier, I do think that it is important to come in and establish for them, okay, the mobile is going to be a 2-column grid, the iPad's going to be a 6-column grid or a 5-column grid, whatever you've determined that to be, and then they have an understanding of what's expected on the other side. But I think that I would come through. I would like use a responsive sort of area in the documentation to say, here's how this changes from one to the next. What we did not uncover was, okay, how do I make this text fully responsive? And we know, we actually know how. We know how to do that. We do not know how to get that done effectively with regard to auto layout. And so my question is, I don't think they're using auto layout. They're probably using just constraints. And if I come back to the notes on this in the Figma community, I think that it's going to say add layouts, add frame, start to resize preview, click on input frames in the plugin to test all edge cases, preview screen with frames based on width of input frames. So it doesn't say constraint, it doesn't say auto layout, although now that I see the version history, yeah, there's no additional notes there. So this is something I'm definitely gonna dig more into. I like it. I think it's useful, but I've not been able to replicate fully what he was doing in that short demo. So I hope this was helpful. I'm gonna take another stab at this, because I'm sure that with just a little more research, I can figure out where the issues are. But I would utilize this to show your devs what these specific things are supposed to do. And you've got your website here, you've got sections like this one, for instance. I guarantee that being able to right now, this section, let's just take this section, all right? And I realize I'm going super long, but really I'm just talking to Rebecca here. So here's this section, right? And actually, yipe, we lost some of the icons. That's not good. Let's come back over to the website and see what happened. Okay, now let's go back to responsive. Did we grab them? And we grabbed most of it, I think. All right, so this is the frame, right? Let's just call this. We'll come over here and we'll do this one more time. Frame, iPhone, and this time I'm just gonna do iPhone and desktop. All right, just to show the difference between the two. There we go. So this is clearly the desktop, right? Right. Yeah, it's not hard to figure out. But this design, which you've already kind of set up and named and all that. Notice that it squeezes. So, this is where a constraint to the top will help. Might just sorted that out right away. So now, the idea is like, okay, so what do I do here to get these cleaned up before I begin to think about responsively what it will do? Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to come in and say, all right, well, this is a unit, group it. This is a unit, group it. This is a unit, group it. So now I'm going to copy these over. Now bring the Y supermelon with me. So Y supermelon. Now, this should come in, and we should be utilizing. You know, I didn't properly create that grid earlier, so don't be like me. There we go. I'm not sure why I lost all of my other peers, but there they are. And then finally, now should you go through and change the size of some of these? Probably. But we're not going to get caught up in that. Not right now. We've done enough. So here's the desktop, here's the iPhone. All right. So your peers are like, so does it squeeze down and I just have two columns, or does this all like what happens? And you want to be able to say, okay, well, I'm going to give you a new frame, and I'm going to call this frame iPhone. We'll call it feature preview, right? And now let's just ditch these. We'll subtract that one, and we'll grab the two that we're going to preview, and then we'll put both in their responsive frame. And now, you know, like I think we can turn the guides off with, yeah, it's Control G. Now when we drag this out, like it stretches because it's got other issues, but yeah, there's something really hinky about this. That did not work the way I want it to at all. Let's take a look at that. What's going on? Oh, okay, left and right. Interesting. Let's just put that left because I don't want necessarily. Although that. Okay, that might uncover something else. That might be helpful for something else. Yeah. Okay. I think I now see something. Yeah. That might be the issue we were having earlier. But at least now you can say, okay, it goes from a 3-column design to a 1-column design. But there are, whoa, that was weird. There are still issues here related to the construction of these shapes. Like, again, this is now scaling. I think it just needs to be left. left, left. Let's take a look at it. So otherwise it's just gonna like stretch across the screen. Like it's not responsive as it was before, but it's only because of the way this is structured. Like if we come through and group these and like set these up into auto layout to where they move together, I think they'd be fine. But ultimately you'll have to go through and determine how much work you want to put into showing the responsiveness. I definitely would put the time in on these like hero units so that they get it. Also be careful because when I ditched the frames over here, like that preview went away. So like to bring the hero unit preview back, I'd have to do this and then do that, and in doing so this is gonna break because like it's not connected anymore. Okay. All right. I've got to jump off of here. It's been a fun time this morning, chatting and looking at responsive as a plugin. This is more just exploratory today. You know, obviously we were trying to help Rebecca look at like what does that handoff look like, and is there a tool that can be beneficial? I think responsive is a tool that can be beneficial. It does come down to making sure that those shapes are constructed in such a way that they are going to take advantage of the tool. But it's something that I think you should definitely spend some time jumping in. And then of course we covered like grids and, you know, what should those grids look like for phone, tablet, desktop, so that when you're communicating with your dev team, they have an understanding of what you're going for. All right, this has been the Feedback Loop, more of a plugin edition